Hello and welcome to stampingcatcrew.com. Super excited for today's card. I've seen so many amazing things with this, and as usual I frequently am doing a card from a color challenge that we are doing because we have them weekly. So I used Night in Bethlehem stamp set, and it has a coordinating framelit set. This is the ones that I used for the buildings here. You can see I've done the very back layer in the taller, and I've done a layer in Early Espresso with this one, and Whisper White also with this one, and then Mary and Joseph with this one. So also did the star framelit for the top. I have my pieces here. This is the envelope we're going to decorate my card base, my pieces that I've die cut, and you can see what I've done here. What I did is I actually layered both of these to have a very even border around the edge, and then I put the star up in the corner and I ran it through the machine, the Big Shot, because I knew that I wanted it to shine through with the blue in the background like that. And so that gave me a little extra color emphasis there without doing any stamping or work on the card. So what I did with the layers is incredibly simple and straightforward. I didn't want to add a lot of color, just a little bit. And so I had a little bit of old olive and a sponge here. I'm going to grab my scratch paper. I always have handy for sponging. Open up my old olive pad, and as usual, start a little off the edge. And then all I did was only on the palm trees. I gave them just a light bit of color. I'm going to do that for each one. Very gently. We don't want it to be the main focal point here. That. And then of course the brown does not need it, so we are good to go there. I'm going to close up the old olive. Well, hello Teddy. This is my little crafting companion. She needs to be on the floor right now. Her name is Teddy Bear. She is my daughter's kitty, but my daughter is kind enough to share her with me. And she is incredibly curious, but she's very peaceful. So with that, the next thing I did is I did a tiny bit of sponging. Hello again, Teddy. And I had the Early Espresso here. So I'm going to set that aside. And you can see this shows up fairly well. So I'm just going to barely go along the tops of the buildings here and in between. And basically we are just simply adding some definition to the buildings. We don't want to add a bunch of color. We don't want to really darken that. We just want to add a shade so that when it lays against the other white colors, it won't show up. I mean, it will show up a little bit more around the edges. So that makes it a nice, easy way to do that. I'm going to close up the Early Espresso, set this aside. The only bit of stamping that we've done is on the envelope and on this layer. And so I took some Island Indigo, which is one of our color challenges, and I'm going to ink up my pad. And with the new foam pads, what I find is a lot of people push very, very hard, and they get color all over the pad, and you really don't need to do that. And so one of the things I like to do is to give it a test run like this, and that way I can see kind of which direction the stamp is going, but also if I've ended up with color around the edges that I don't want to have there. I'm going to ink that up again. We know basically how this falls, and we know we want it to be fairly centered right there. And so I'm just going to go straight down and straight back up with even pressure, and that's all you want to do. So I'm going to set that one aside again, close up the Island Indigo, and then we're going to start with our layers. So our base is cut at 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches. It is scored and folded at 4 1/4. I've used the bone folder to flatten that out. And as usual, when you have a dark piece of paper, I've cut a white layer to put along the inside. So I'm going to put adhesive along the 4 edges. I'm going to open up my card and I'm going to lay this here because it allows people to write something inside without it having a dark background. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some adhesive on this top white layer, and this is the one that we've die cut and layered up with the early espresso. And so we want to have the star layered evenly, keeping in mind that you have lined up the 4 corners already. Oh, and because we're on camera, I had that upside down to put adhesive, and I've smeared that a bit. But for the magic of camera, we'll keep on going. So what I'm going to do is, rather than put adhesive on the back of that, normally I don't do this. I'm going to put it on the base instead and just know that I'm going inside the border that I would have had around. Normally I like to put it along the edges, but because we're going a bit faster, we're going to do it this way. You're going to even up your 4 sides, just like this. And so the important part is our layering of our buildings. And one of the things you want to watch for is, we know we want to have our base about here, and that's going to be popped up. Our second base stands right behind our first layer, and it is about there. And then our third layer, we know, I always like to lay things out ahead of time, so I know I have an idea of exactly where things are going to fall. Hello, Ted. Not a good place to lay. Yeah, I know. So we are right here. I sure love you. Anyway, so we know this is going to lay fine as long as we have it right about here, which is pretty much where we had the original one. So I'm going to add some adhesive along the very base of this. And go just about here. Now we know we want our silhouette to be up in the corner right here, and a little bit off the edge here, just like that. And our second layer, again, adding some adhesive along the edges. And we know we want the buildings to be a little bit offset. So we're kind of setting that up to do that, so that those will give some depth and dimension. Our final layer, we are actually going to use the dimensionals from Stampin' Up, and I'm going to put some big dimensionals in our big open spaces. We have a few of those. And then Stampin' Up is amazing, and they came out with some mini dimensionals this year, which I just love. And those are right here. And those we can put in our smaller areas of space here. And no more cutting dimensionals in half. I'm going to remove the adhesive backing from those. And again, we know we want that offset a bit and right along the bottom, and that gives us some of that depth that we wanted. And then what I did is I took some of the buildings and not really curve them, but made sure to lift them up, that they weren't like curving towards the back. We wanted them kind of popping up. And that's something I do often with flowers, with all sorts of things that we have lying flat on the paper. I tend to like really a lot of flow and dimension in my cards. So this is the original card that we did. There is a spattering of stars that's in there, and we used it to decorate the envelope with the Island Indigo. So super easy, and I may go back and do a little bit of repair work along this little smudge. My motto is everything is fixable. So there are lots of ways. A lot of us have so many things to use for crafting that really, there's so many ways that you can fix and enhance things. So hope today's tutorial was good and you enjoyed it. Thanks so much and happy creating.